Houston, we have a problem, and one we've got to solve fast. Welcome to Between the Sharks. So this is our K5 that you may recognize from other videos. I have been driving the pants off this thing, and I am happy to say at this point that I am not dead and did not kill anyone on the road. The steering had been getting gradually sloppier, and when I would hit the brakes, the steering wheel would kind of turn a good bit, and I got my hands under there and I tried to move everything, check the sway bar, and finally I had a little buddy turn the steering wheel while the engine was running, and I saw this. Right? So the center pin on the leaf springs must be broken, and I don't know if those U-bolts aren't tight enough or if that's just not enough to hold it in place with all of the force involved. But basically the power steering mechanism was strong enough to move the axle and slide it up and down along the length of the leaf spring. So the axle is turning one way and the wheels are turning back the other. Yeah, it's a real problem. So we've got to get in there and find out if the center pin's broken, which I'm sure it is at this point, and find out why it's broken. If it just broke, it just broke. But if it didn't, then what happened? Are the U-bolts too loose? What's going on? Because we've got to fix this, because I need this thing back on the road stat. And yeah, I don't have any time to do it. So now's the time. So you can actually see on either side, let's see if I can get in there with you to help out, like this grease mark over here and this grease mark over here. And that's how far the axle has slid forward and back. I drive this on the highway, gang. Like, not even kidding you. Basically, we've got to lift this thing up by the spring off the axle and then pull that mount out. I'm not even sure what's going on, but we're gonna find out. All right, fellas, so we gotta separate the suspension from the axle. It's leaf spring, so this works front or rear, but I'm trying to think smart. I'm gonna do myself a favor and take this tire off so I can lower the axle so I don't have to lift the car quite as much. And I actually remembered to try to break these lug nuts before I lift the car, which is not something I usually do. All right, you know what I should get? I should get one of my sheet trays. Those usually work for this kind of project. Ouch! The frame is held up by the leaf spring, which mounts from here, and then the front. The front's really high right now. I think that'll do for the back. I'd like to put something there for just safety, because what I gotta do is drop this axle down. And we gotta support the frame while we do that. I don't want it to tweak or bend. I don't think it will, but a little bit of safety over here. However, it's a lot. It's a lot more than I have jack stands. So we're gonna have to stack a bunch of stuff that will not break. All right, gang. Got a jack stand back yonder. Got a jack stand on a lot of wood over here. Can't say I love any of the situation, but I don't have a lot of options here. I probably need to invest in some, mucho grande jack stands for this, but it probably is time, because actually I had to throw the Model T on the cinder block, which is more than fine for a car that doesn't really have any car on it. But it turns out that even though I have more jack stands than the average bear, it turns out I have more junk than the average bear too. So my jack stand to junk ratio is skewed toward junk right now. So yeah, maybe it is time to get some more jack stands. Obviously, I'm not gonna stop what I'm doing and do that now, but let's see if we can lower this old fella down. Right now, I've got a jack stand under the axle that we're removing. And then I am going to lower the jack holding up the axle onto these jack stands. Here and here, hopefully. And then, with any luck, we'll be able to use the jack to just support the weight of the axle while we pull the bolts, the U-bolts out. Sound like a plan? Sure, I talked you through it. That means I talked myself through it, which means it'll probably work. Let's do it. That's so low the way that's sitting. Let's try that. Try to get a little better. All right. Well, not dead yet. Got the jack under the axle. I'm gonna lift that up just enough to take the weight, and then we'll try to pull all these bolts. See what we got going on under there. It's probably not gonna be good. All right, gang. Well, there are certain things on certain projects that just stink, and you just have to embrace the, the suck of it all, because we are stuck here in a wheel well. I don't have a better way to do this. It's a 1-inch nut, and that's all I've got. I don't have a deep well nearly deep enough to work on these things, so all we got to do is fight with it. There's really not a lot of options here. But let's take a look real quick. So that's close to 3/4 of an inch this away toward the front of the car, and then we have a similar mark right here in the grease that's like 3/4 of an inch that way, which means as I was steering, right, the steering arm here was connected to whatever this is, the dingle hopper. As this pushed backwards, the whole axle was sliding back 3/4 of an inch before the wheel started to turn this way. And then when I tried to turn right, the entire axle from that point shifted 1.5 inches to its furthest forward point before the wheel started turning, and then 1.5 inches back. Like 3/4 each way is a big deal. And I knew the steering was super sloppy. I'd even replaced this ball joint. Well, I replaced this joint. I checked these a bunch of times, like moving everything around, jacking things up, seeing what I could move. Wasn't until I put somebody in the driver's seat and had them turn the steering wheel with the power steering and the engine running that I saw what was actually moving around. I must have 1,000 miles on it like this. Like, I knew it was sloppy, and it just felt like it was kind of getting worse recently. So I dug into it again, and man, it's bad. I don't know if it's badder, but it's been very bad for a while. So let's see if we can fix it. All right, gang, we got the nuts off, and there was a very mismatched set of washers on there. I'm not sure what's supposed to be on there, but there was one flat washer on one. Two of them had a lock washer, and one of them had nothing. One of my questions, this has been raised and lowered enough times, I'm wondering if the U-bolt threads aren't long enough for the smaller spring pack than what used to be on here when the Bubba's had it really jacked up. But either way, we got to knock these things out, and that should drop the axle down just a little bit more. We should be able to, and then we'll deal with the other forces. Either the shock may be holding it up here, the sway bar is attached to this piece. We'll just try to get her loose and see what happens. A little disconcerting, but that's okay. Car didn't move, it's just the spring pack loosening up, I think. In fact, if I'm smart, I'm gonna go to C-clamp and clamp the spring pack together, because if there's no center bolt in it anymore, it's just gonna go sproing. think I didn't damage the threads. In fact, this part will probably damage it more than anything. Slipping it through this whole bit. There we go. Oh boy. Yeah, okay. Well, gang, there's the problem. That was the centering pin. It's sheared right off, but it also feels like it's extraordinarily undersized. I pulled this out, which is the very broken what used to be bolt, which doesn't look rated. That was holding the spring pack together, which in theory is good enough to hold the spring pack together. I just didn't really, you know, consider it to be so important in locating the axle. I thought the U-bolts kind of did that, but boy howdy, I was wrong. And if you look down here, let's see if we get the light to not glare. If you take a look down there, that hole is really, really, really out of whack and elongated because of all of the movement for as many miles as I've put on in this terrifying condition. We're gonna try to find the right, or at least a grade 8 bolt that's the right size. And I think I'm gonna go ahead and take that third leaf out, this guy, while I'm in here, because the original spring setup on this was a 2-spring setup. Like, it only had 2 leaves. This is clearly a lift spring, but it's also a lot firmer because of those, like that third helper spring. So I'm hoping that it'll at least bring it down, probably not much, maybe like a ½ inch or so, but it'll also soften the ride. This raised steering arm is way, 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 way too high for this, and this steering geometry is gonna it's already bad, it's gonna get worse. But these are extremely difficult to get out, but we'll burn that bridge when we get to it. I have a stock steering arm and everything else. I am just terrified of breaking these bolts off, because then I don't have another one of those. So first things first, let me see if I can get this cleaned up. Let me see if we can go ahead and get that spring loose and figure out how to put this back together. The reason I'm pulling that leaf out at this point is because it's something I've wanted to do, and I feel like for safety reasons, there's still a lot of day left. I've got to look at the other side, because if the other side has an equally small, you know, center pin, eventually that's going to give it up too, without a doubt. So for the sake of not dying, we're just going to have to get into the passenger side as well, which is going to be no fun, but we should do it. No offense to you guys that love these like big jacked up trucks, but it's just not my bag, man. I always thought they looked super cool stock. Maybe slightly larger tires, but like not way up in the air. That was loud. Can't decide if that would be enough. I don't think so, but it's pretty darn close. So we gotta go buy some hardware. I'm gonna get some grade 8 stuff. The grade 8 3/8 won't exactly fit down in the hole like I want it to, but this thing fits perfectly. So maybe I can find something like this, or an Allen key that's rated, because, you know, what happened here was real bad. Had to run to the hardware store, which was the right thing to do, rather than make up things out of the junk I have laying around. And I did some unusually smart things for me. First of all, bought myself a new one of these because I had it out by the Mercury. I like these because I'm too lazy to put the things back in a rail or back in the little thing. I can just plunk these on, and it's the closest thing I can be to organize, because I'm way too lazy to use other stuff. But I had my regular one out by the Mercury, and I was just like, literally, every time I passed by it, I kicked one of these things off, because they're a little more fragile than a guy would like, but I think they're super helpful. I'm gonna put it somewhere that I'm gonna break it, I'm sure. Next smart decision. a deep well 1-inch socket, which is what I needed to deal with these nuts that we had to take off. Then an unbelievably smart maneuver, I just bought boxes of nuts and washers and stuff, just because. Turns out that by the box, I actually did the math there because I'm cheap, that it costs literally 50% of what the single nut or bolt price is. So I went to the Old Ace Hardware and they gave me this, you know, fancy reusable grocery bag for free. What else do we get? Oh, and I got these fancy cap screws to hold our springs together. I got a couple of sizes, so I didn't cheap out because I didn't want to go back. I spent the extra $3 to not be lazy. I also bought brandy new lock washers for our U-bolts, and I bought flat washers as well. So we're actually going to put this thing back together correctly, I hope. I think, maybe. All right, guys, I'm going to Vanna White this for you. You may have seen this on the channel before if you're new. This is one of the things that has saved my butt like no other. I don't know what I paid for it. Not nearly enough. I don't tout tools and toolkits a lot. I usually buy a bunch of junk cheap tools and then lose parts and pieces of them and buy more junk cheap tools. That's just how I operate because it's who I am, you know? But this thing has such a variety of whoop-de-doos. I've actually kept this kit together. This is like 4 years running, which is remarkable for me. Personal record, never happened with anything else I own, but you know, that's super helpful, and you can use it with an impact or whatever else you need. Anyway, enough of that. Let's see. I bought 2 different lengths. We'll just see what works for my application. Look that way. Well, I dragged the welder over, but honestly, I don't know which direction it's wallered out or if it's wallered out in all of them. Stinks. Basically, I'm afraid of welding up one side or the other because I don't know where it's actually supposed to go. So while it's wallered out more than I want, I'm hoping with the new correct bolt, with the larger head, which, you know, is still pretty snug front to back. There is some movement right to left. Plus the new lock washers, plus the new everything else, we'll be able to get these U-bolts super tight. And hopefully it'll stay still. I don't know. I just don't know what else to do. I mean, I guess I can get back in here if I see any movement. We'll have to test that out. But right now, it feels like welding this up might be a larger mistake than not welding it up. Maybe that's fear. Probably fear talking. So let's go ahead and see if we can get this side back together, I suppose. Yep, let's do that. All right, gang, so the goal here is to kind of lift the axle enough to get the U-bolts in. But man, how we're gonna get everything to line up is an entirely different problem. Starting to think maybe I need to pull the sway bar down. That's probably my best bet. Let's do that. It's these moments where I ask myself, would a lift be helpful? I'm like, partially yes, partially no. Maybe in this case, the answer is yes. Wrong button. Can't see. Can you guys see? Tell me where I'm at. Come on now. Just do what I want, please. We're sneaking up on that point, fellas. We're gonna like remind myself I do this for fun. You know, I could probably finance a Hyundai or a Kia. Salesman would let me walk right out of there with a brandy new car. Where am I even oh, up there. Well, somewhere, somebody's just hanging out on the beach, having a good time. Makes the guy wonder about his life choices. You know, I thought I was gonna have a pretty big cleanup job in here when I was done, but at this point, I'm just kind of sopping it up with my shirt as I go. Let's just try something different because I don't want to do this anymore. Hey, look at that. I'm wondering if I can get the U-bolts in, cinch it up, you know? It's kind of how they're supposed to work, sort of. I have had to clamp these things closed in the past, and I think that might be the world we're living in, unfortunately. It's super unfortunate, because everything's greasy right now, including me. Take the hose and a gallon of Dawn to myself before we're through here. All right, that's mildly better. So I got the two ends in, which is good. Just use that clamp. It's not, I mean, if it weren't so greasy, it would be a little easier. Just gonna try to tap her through though. No, wrong way. I need to tighten it just a fuzz more. So close. There we go. Now we're talking. You gotta be kidding me. Poo. Poo, poo. Well, I just bought these. Even checked them on some 9/16 hardware. And they sure seemed right to me. But I guess what was on there is 5/8. I mean, the good news is they did have the 5/8 at the hardware store. The bad news is they're at the hardware store. All right, I guess we're making another trip here, boys. Not what I want to do. All right, gang, the day is moving on quite rapidly. I'm back to my second trip to the hardware store. If I go for a third time, this becomes a home plumbing project because I've never gotten out of a home plumbing project without 3 trips to the hardware store. Let's see. Yep. Well, it's interesting because these, I was using the internet as a guide and it said these bolts were 9/16, which that's kind of sloppy and that's a 5/8, but these 9/16s don't want to go on. Either way, I'm kind of a dummy because the first trip to the hardware store was after I got the U-bolts out, so I could have taken it with me is what I'm saying. So let me see if I can get this bolted up. I think we're kind of lined up on our pin, but we've just got to, you know, get everything tied together. And because we've seen what we've seen, I got to check the pin on the other side, the center pin for the leaf springs, because we may have the same issue with it being undersized and wrong in every kind of way. And I've already committed to removing a leaf spring. So when I say we're lowering it, we're not like low rider lowering it. We're just like de-rednecking it like 7%. That's all. So I'm gonna work towards getting this next bit of no fun out of the way. I need to get this other U-bolt in there. You guys may have noticed this persistent drip of power steering fluid we got going on. I'm gonna completely ignore that because I ain't got time for it, you know what I mean? It's pretty wild. I mean, it's like a 1/4 inch out. Good think I got the longest one of these things. No. Need a new plan. Finally got it in there. I think we're just gonna try to draw it all up, you know, as evenly as possible and see how far we get. Hopefully it'll center everything out. Our pin feels pretty lined up, although it could seat just a fuzz better down in here. You'd think I've been working for like 45 minutes, but no, it's really been about 15. It's just gross in here. I just destroyed that box out of impatience. That was dumb. Let's see, I can get the impact in on this side. Well, I still got threads down to the lock washer at least, so maybe we can go a little further. I think to make life easier though, I may have to replace these anyway. I'm gonna get in here and just zip these dudes off with a cutoff wheel, at least, you know, a ½ inch lower, to see if we can keep an impact on there and really get a socket and tighten those things up. There's no point in all this extra material. All right, gang, that's pretty tightened down at this point. I think we're good. I mean, I can't move it anymore, obviously. That shouldn't surprise anybody there. I think I'm gonna do the smart thing next time, and I'm gonna trim those U-bolts before I take the nuts off. That'll clean the thread, A, and B, and it'll allow me to use the impact driver to pull the nuts off, thus making my life significantly easier. So how about that? This, it's just pouring. I don't know if that's, yeah, we're gonna ignore that for now. And we gotta repeat everything we've just done, including this precarious jack stand situation. Over yonder, we gotta check that bolt, and we've gotta remove the leaf that we don't want anymore, because we don't want it anymore. And then we'll pull it out and see how, like, you know, East Coast angry it is. And if it's really nose down, then we'll get involved in the back end. I mean, there's more than enough reason here. Oh yeah, check this out too. That's not tight at all. We got one side done. I'm hoping moving over to the other side and checking that center pin and all that stuff will be a little easier based on what we did here. We also have to drop that bottom leaf out, and then we'll go around and just kind of put a wrench on everything. Now, I didn't really measure anything before I took that leaf out, and I just measured the distance, and it's a little dark in here, on showing exposed on the shock. Clearly, these are the wrong shocks at this point because I've lowered it enough since I got it. Sitting still on this relatively level garage floor, it only looks like taking that leaf out brought it down about 3/4 of an inch. And I would say 3/8 of that at least were actually, you know, the leaf itself. So what that tells me is we're not actually dropping it down that much. I mean, you can still see there's quite a, there's that. So what I do hope happened is we have just softened the ride at least a good bit in the front, because it was stiff. It was stiff. But I'm most excited about the fact that this thing might be, well, unless I'm nuts, something like this is going to be 1000% easier to drive. There may be slop in every single one of these tie rod ends, but nothing's gonna be like moving the entire axle 3/4 of an inch each direction every time you turned. So let's get to the other side. Let's slap in a time lapse and some royalty-free music, and I'll stop the camera anytime I really screw something up or we find something that surprises us. Hopefully this will go smoothly. Wish me luck. All right, storm clouds are coming in. This one was also sheared, so good thing, you know, I didn't get lazy and decide to just not look over here because, well, next thing that was gonna be bad. So we're gonna replace that just the same as we replaced the other one. Pop that leaf out and see if we can make it all better. Hey there, gang. Well, now seems about as good a time as any to fill you fellers in. Both of the center pins on the front leaf springs were busted, like sheared right off. Just retightening our sway bar here. You know, guys got to have that. I split my thumb open something fierce, and I did it by crushing it against something sharp. We'll call that a double whammy because it's singing from being swollen, but it's also bleeding. I believe heavily. You know, I need to start buying 9/16 deep well sockets by the dozen because I can't keep track of one for more than a week, I don't think. What am I doing? Does anybody know? We've learned a couple things here. First of all, I believe we have reduced the probability of instant death by like many percentages. So both of the centering pins for the springs were sheared off, which means two things. First of all, the spring packs were no longer really connected to each other. They could shift on these broken things quite a bit. Now the other thing is the way they sheared, the tops were completely gone, meaning the axle could slide forward and backward along the spring pack as it so chose, which is problematic because that can steer the vehicle. As these things got looser and looser and then they finally broke, I just got used to it getting sloppier and sloppier, because when I drove it originally, this was too small, so it had some movement in there already, so I guess I got used to that. In fact, I even remember one of the first times I drove it trying to tighten the screws on the steering box because I thought there was a lot of slop in the steering box. But it was probably these things like moving around until they finally broke after bending, after all of that stuff, and I was just kind of used to it. All right, gang, so when I bought this truck, it was like an 8 on the Bubba factor, meaning like 8 different Bubbas had the truck at some point and tried to put it together, or 8 Bubbas all got together and each drank 8 beers and decided to build a muddin truck one afternoon. What that means is whoever started with this thing, well, the last person or persons to have this thing before I got it didn't really know what they were doing, and they never finished it. So what that translates to is maybe they were geniuses, but I doubt it. They never got past the mock-up phase. So incorrect bolts as placeholders, things hand tight. I did go over it at some point long before I started the channel and put a wrench on stuff. This isn't really one you can get to. Subsequently, I found stuff that I've missed, tried to fix it as I go, but it's a reminder, you know, like, it's good to safety inspect these things every once in a while you're driving them at 70 miles an hour and you have precious cargo in there like the dog. Probably should have done that sooner, you know. Anywho, this is hopefully going to revolutionize the driving ability of this vehicle. We probably need to replace the shocks because there's like 2.5 inches of throw, because these were some big kind of like dumb shocks, but they were probably also well past due, expired, kaput, long before we lowered this thing a little bit. The other thing is we gotta, you know, we'll test drive it because I want to see how it does, and then we'll stop and we'll take, you know, a look and see if we've got too much anti-Florida lean, you know, where the nose is down, or like the East Coast macho thing. All right, let's go for a spin, see how we did. With any luck, you know, we're better. All right, round 2. Holy smokes, fellas, we even managed to keep the shop tidy while we worked. Nope, not at all. But I found a water slide. I mean, it's not bad. She came down maybe an inch total, maybe, not even, I don't know. It's fine for now, but it also means that we can drop the back end without looking like we're from Florida. All right, moment of truth, gang. We're gonna turn out of the driveway, and I am not kidding you. I'm excited, a little embarrassed that I was able, you know, but maybe I should be impressed that I was able to drive it in the condition it was at 70 miles an hour. Not kidding. And oh my God, it's just, it works. Like, let's just go into the parking lot. Let's see how she does. I can't even tell you how different it is. That shouldn't be a surprise. Oh my God, it was so bad. This may as well be an Indy car at this point. I mean, I can't believe how responsive it is relative to how did I ever drive this thing? Good gracious. I'm glad we caught that before we died. She is not perfect. She's still a big, heavy lifted truck, but it's 1,000 times better than it used to be. Look at that. There she is, ready for many more adventures. She drove 1,000 times better. That shouldn't surprise anyone watching. Speaking of watching, if you've made it this far, please consider subscribing. It really does help the channel out, and it costs you $0. In fact, I don't even, like, it's just a thing that helps the channel in the YouTube land. Like, you don't even get annoying emails or anything. You know, I'm not gonna call you on the phone at dinner time, and just, you know, do your best safety checks that you can come up with. And if you feel something weird, turns out something might be a little broken, or the vehicle may be trying to kill you. Or enjoy your projects. Good luck with them. We'll see you next time on Between the Sharks.